Hey Michelle, I was looking at your project. When you first submitted it, I thought literally because of the style of it, it looked like you basically cut out your illustration of it and then put it on the Illustrator format and then sent it to me. So I didn't think that it was vector, but then when I opened your project file to double check, I realized that what you did was basically use a stylized art brush to create that look. And then I was thinking back to what I told you, and then I realized it's probably because I told you to do more of a stylized, like kind of organic-y look to it. So that's probably my fault. I still like the overall shape of it, but as far as the style of it, with all of these, I'll zoom in, all of these tiny little details here, there's going to be a lot of issues when you reproduce it and go to print it. And like if you ever had to embroider it or do like screen printing or anything, this is going to cause a lot of problems. So I would not do the stylized art brush and try and keep it a lot more simple, like the simplified shapes and stuff like that. I like her more solid. I think you had on the other version. Yeah, I like her more solid as opposed to having these lines on it. I don't mind a little bit of detail on her, but these lines, especially if you don't like add line variety or anything to it, then it's just going to look kind of cluttered and messy, and it's going to look really busy because there's so much going on compared to the rest of her outfit. She doesn't have a lot of other areas where there's a lot going on, so this is going to be very distracting. So I would go in, and again, I apologize. I'm sure you probably did this because I told you to stylize it a little bit. But I would go in and clean this up a little bit so that it doesn't have all those tiny little lines. And let's see what else. Play with the line variety a little bit. Like these in here are very similar. So I'd play with that and make it look a little bit more interesting with the style. Give it a little bit more depth and dimension. So make some areas a little bit more thicker where there'd be the shadows, and maybe a little bit more thinner where there wouldn't be. Her hair is going to be tricky. I guess maybe try and do like the braids and then have like a little bit of a white stroke going around it. So I'll let you play around and see what you want it to look like. As far as overall shape of it, I think looks pretty good. Just playing with the line style and everything. I like her as the A in Farmers. I think that's really cute. The Farmers I know is going to change too, but I'd give a little bit more space between the and Farmers, because when it's zoomed out it just seems like it's a little bit crowded, like it's going to start to run together. So just make sure there's a little bit of white space right there between the two words. Let's see what else. I actually like the mix of the fonts. I don't mind that too much. It's running off a little bit, so it's going to be hard to see. I'm just going to shrink this down a little bit. Yeah, I don't mind that too much. Maybe make daughter a little bit smaller just so that it's not hanging too much over the edge, because your logo becomes very long. And you might want to thicken up her legs a little bit, because you can see when I do it that size it gets lost a little bit. And especially if she's going to be the A, I'd make this area just a little bit thicker. You don't want to have, fat legs or anything like that, but make them just a little bit more prominent so that they don't get lost when it's like at that size. And then the other really important thing that you need to look at is when you submitted it, you can't really see it in Illustrator, unfortunately. So it's one of those things that you don't realize that you're doing until you see it in a different format. But if you look at the one online, you can see that this is a much darker black than this is. And the reason why is because this is a pure RGB black, 100% RGB black, and this is more of a CMYK black. So if you go to Illustrator, what you can do is if you click on this and go over to your color palette, you can see that if you hold down Shift with your color palette open, sorry, if it's not open, by the way, you can go to Window and select Color. Once you have it open, if you hold down Shift, you can click anywhere on this color slider on the bottom, and it's going to cycle through the different color modes. So you want it to be in RGB, since we're not going to print this. So for this project, it's only going to be displayed on the computer, so we're doing RGB. Once you get to RGB, you want to make sure that these are all the way set to 0, which is going to be pure black. So you need to drag these all the way to the edge. Sadly, unfortunately, if you eyedropper this, you would think that that's pure black, but it's not. It's actually a little bit less than pure black. So you have to go through and literally drag these all the way to 0. Or you can use the color swatch, but make sure that it's pure RGB. So go through that, and there was a couple areas. It's easier to see it in here, the ones that weren't pure black. So it looks like the F and her and the R are RGB probably, but then the rest of it isn't. So if you want to go through and just make sure that all of these are pure black. All right. Other than that, she's looking pretty good. Just like I said, don't use that stylized brush and play with the line variety a little bit more. I don't mind you using some details on her, but I think that the crosshatch was a little bit too much. So maybe just a little bit of it. You can play around with it and see how you want it to look. Right? Sorry, I was taking a second look at it, but looking good so far. Good job.